Well, what do we do now? Let's vibe. Welcome everyone to the latest and greatest episode of Power Vibes here on the Big East Energy Network. Brought to you by Homefield Apparel. Go to homefieldapparel.com. Get the greatest throwback gear that you can find in college sports. I'd say the latest and greatest episode. I don't know if this is the greatest episode, the greatest feeling episode. This is the latest episode. And it could be the last episode where we're talking about a legit NCAA bid. Seton Hall last night fell to DePaul 69-57 in a disastrous second half. Actually had 35 points in the first half, which is surprising for this team this year if you watch it. But the second half kind of summarized what the Pirates' downfall has been, as they've lost 7 of the last 11. And now are 8-8 in the Big East. They're 18-9 overall. And their bubble chances, their bid chance to the NCAA, basically on life support. There is still a path. Let's be honest. They're not completely eliminated. They're not Providence. They're not Georgetown. But to be the fourth team out of the Big East, it just seems like highly unlikely, unless you go and beat Connecticut and St. John's. But Pat and Tim will join us here on Pirate Vibes, and they'll go through their segment of basically the bracketology before this game, and they include some stuff if what happens when based off of this game. Still got a game against UConn and St. John's left. Probably one of the toughest stretches of the season still to come up. Let's talk about this game, right? First half, they're up 35-33. Elijah Fisher hits on 3. I think Pat, Tim, and myself have talked about Elijah Fisher's lack of being able to hit an outside shot and be able to not finish at the rim. He hits a 3. It just seems like a wacky game. And then they go in a little lull, and then they come back, and defense creates some pressure on DePaul, and they come back. Second half was a summary of the season. The offense is ugly. One thing that has to be addressed is that the offense has to have a shooter. Now, they shot 4 for 10 from 3. Sounds great. Bud Clark actually took a 3. It was a deep 3. I was actually shocked. They went 11 for 15 and free throw. But, God, man, sometimes that offense is so ugly because they have a lack of a shooter. Because you can play kind of his own defense. You can collapse because you know on a pick and roll, the guy's never going to pop. And if he does pop, who cares? So it's pretty easy to play defense against Seton Hall, especially if you look at Bud Clark's numbers: 7 for 12 from the field, 0 for 1, 3, 5 for 7 free throw. Missed that huge 1-on-1 when the game was still kind of within chance. He's not the only one. Stat McRae also missed the front end of 1-on-1, and that just kind of killed it. And they shot 11 for 15, but those 2 big free throws really killed all momentum. Bud Clark did turn over the ball as many times as he got an assist, 5 points, 5 assists and 5 turnovers. Played 36 minutes, only 1 rebound, which Bud Clark normally comes in and gets you a big rebound here and there. Only 1 rebound. 0 steals when his defense and his pressure is not effective. And when I mean by effective, I mean where he is creating the steal, where he is he is the driver of the defense being effective. That's when Seton Hall has been at their best. When he's had games like this where he turns over the ball, but he's not creating turnovers at the same time, even though he ended up with 19 points, it has not looked pretty. It's as simple as that. It has not been their most effective offense. Shooting 21-45 is not terrible, right? Second half, they shot 8 of 21. It's not like DePaul was lighting the world on fire, right? 15 turnovers for the Pirates, 5 from your point guard, 2 from your starting 2 guard, right? Najee Hines with 3, and we'll talk about Najee in a second. Really just an ugly game, and it summarizes what the second half of this, well, what is it now? 7 out of the last 11 games feels like. There's just seemed like on repeat. After the Creighton Nova disaster week, they come back with 2 good wins. But then DePaul comes up and DePaul completes a sweep. I'm pretty sure DePaul has swept Seton Hall at one point, but I don't remember last time, and they probably said it last night, and I just did not pick it. But 28 points in the paint, 2 fast break points. 2. Right? Points off turnovers, 18. You created 13 turnovers. We talk about a point and a half, right? So we want to be in that 20-ish range. They're at 18. So a little low. I just think this game summarized the whole season. There are moments when it looked like everything was going to click. There are moments when it looked like a dumpster fire. That's just what it is. The path forward, Tim and Pat will touch on it, talk about bracketology. It's real simple. You got to win. You got to win, and you got to beat St. John's and probably UConn. Luckily, all the bubble teams have we talked about this on Big East Beat. We're not like normally you talk about bubble teams where there's flawed teams. I think this year you're talking about a lot of bad teams. I think the discrepancy from the top of these power conferences to the middle and the teams fighting for the bid is pretty big, more than what I recall long term. Who's the player of the game? Who cares? We'll talk about a little bit. Let's go over to Shah and what his quote was for the game. On the second half, Shah had to say, I talked about Seton Hall's second half. I don't know. You got to give credit to DePaul. I was really worried about this game because when you watch them on the first game, they just out-toughed us. And they did the same thing this game. I told the guys, this is one of the games we got to be aggressive on offense just as much as we're aggressive on defense because that's the way they play. They try to take everything away. But we just looked like we didn't have no thirst for whatever reason, and we just did uncharacteristic things down the stretch that we normally don't do. I'm going to disagree with Shah. I think there's a lot of things that I've seen before. I've seen the missed free throws on the one-on-one. I've seen the bad turnovers. I've seen the missed layups. I've seen the lack of a three-point shooter. I've seen this. You've seen this. Pat's seen this. Tim's seen this. Maybe we haven't really seen it at the end of games a lot. Most of the time, they're coming back in the energy, but they were out toughed, and that's credit to Seton Hall. I mean, to DePaul. DePaul's a good team, or a better team. DePaul's not an easy out. Either is Seton Hall, but Seton Hall was fighting for their bubble life, and it just didn't work out. All right. So that's my segment talking about. We'll dive more next week. I know we've got a week off here with the show, and we'll get prepped for the UConn, but they got to win out. They got to beat Georgetown. They've got to beat Xavier. They've got to beat UConn. Got to beat St. John's, and probably a game in the tournament. If you beat UConn and St. John's, I feel like you're safe, but you can never be safe in the Big East with the way the tournament is shaping up. Let's get a message from our sponsor, Homefield Apparel.
The Big East Energy Network is proud to partner with Homefield Apparel, a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis. They've got over 150 different colleges to choose from in their arsenal, including all of the Big East programs that you know and love. If you're a Big East fan, chances are you kind of have an old school soul. Well, you want that old school look while you're showing off your fandom, the logos, the history. It's such a part of the Big East. And Homefield Apparel, that's their specialty. They go through all the archives and history of each school, try to delve into what makes it special before they put out any type of new apparel. And they just dropped a whole bunch of new product when it comes to the Big East. I have spent literally hours just going through all the different options that they have. It is a real fun trip down memory lane, and it also can add to your wardrobe. Visit homefieldapparel.com for more information or check out the link in the description below. Homefield Apparel, a proud supporter of the Big East Energy Network.
Thanks, Matt. We're going to kick it over to Pat and Tim with the vibe check.
So that's going to wrap up this segment of Pirate Vibes. I think Brian will be taking us home with some commentary about DePaul and maybe a quick preview about Georgetown. Okay, welcome back to this episode of Pirate Vibes. Patrick Madden here along with Tim Best. As Brian described in the opening, we're going to do a rundown of Seton Hall's 63-56 win over Butler. We're going to do a little bit of a dive into the bracketology at this point because, you're sort of at that point where you want to see what happens with the two games this week. Obviously, this will come out after the DePaul game. And unfortunately, you can probably ignore most of the bracketology stuff if, God forbid, they lose to DePaul on Wednesday night. And then we'll touch briefly upon the debacle up in Providence on Saturday. Tim's got a couple of thoughts that he'd like to share on the matter, and then he'll have the Sign Mafia. So, Tim, how do things go up in upstate New York?
Things have been finally warming up for once. Like, it's actually such a relief that we're hitting the 30s. I've had quite an insane busy week over the last week or so. Like today, I finally had like a true off day from everything. It's February break in school. Apparently, I didn't know this is like a Northeast exclusive type of thing. I had games to announce Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So if I do somehow sound a little hoarse, apologize in advance, but I think I'm doing all right with that. And things are going well up here, especially overall morale. Whenever Seton Hall is doing better, I feel like I'm overall in better spirits. I hate that my mental health is codependent on this team. But
you're not the only one. And you see the people on X, you see some of the people on Facebook, and the last, let's say 5 weeks have been since Seton Hall got ranked right before the Connecticut game. People are like, this team stinks. Then they win a couple of games, and then wow, look at how great we are. Then we lose a couple. It's been. We were 14-2, and now we're 18-7. So that means that we've gone 4-5 since we got ranked. Now, in fairness, 3 of those games were home against Connecticut, at St. John's, and at Villanova. So you have to temper your expectations a little bit. And it's sort of just a context of the season. And that's a great transition to Sunday night's game, which, of course, when you were going into Sunday night's game and the availability report came out Sunday afternoon, and you saw that Finley Bizjack, the leading scorer for Butler, was questionable. And then a couple of hours later, some of the people at Butler noticed that he came walking onto the court in a sweatsuit and flip-flops, meaning that he wasn't going to play because of an injured wrist. So immediately, of course, all sorts of things happen. You start to see for what it's worth, the point spread went up a couple of points to Seton Hall's favor. You start to feel better about their chances in that game. And then the game starts, and Butler gets off to the teams go back and forth, but Butler gets off to about, I think it was a 5-point lead. within the closing minutes of the first half for Seton Hall to pull that back to 2. And then the second half up until the closing minutes was a back and forth affair. I think Butler was up by as much as 7 in the second half. So people's mentality is this Butler game is the one game we probably should have had an opportunity to go coast to coast and win a game comfortably. So what were some of your thoughts going into and then as the game was transpiring on Sunday night?
So yeah, I didn't know because I was working a soccer game Sunday afternoon with kickoff was at 3:00. And obviously the men's, Seton Hall men played at 6 that night. So unfortunately I wasn't able to like tap into Twitter and whatever to see what the pregame news was. And obviously that was a big bombshell that Finley Bizjack did not play in this game for Butler. You would have thought like, okay, this is the guy who's their leading scorer and he killed Seton Hall in Newark the first time they met back in January. But Seton Hall did their job. Like they prevented Butler from doing really anything strong offensively. And like that's supposed to happen when you don't have your leading scorer. But unfortunately, Seton Hall's offense really struggled for the most part until AJ Staten McCray, who he's been on and off, but when he's on, he's one of the top scorers, if not the top scorer on this team. Bud Clark notwithstanding. But if it wasn't for a big second half by AJSM, we'd be talking about this team's at-large hopes being done. So it was AJSM, the tremendous interior play defensively with 11 blocked shots, I think they finished with on the night. And then Bud Clark with the dagger off the glass with the bank shot in the final minute. Just a thing of beauty on that play. At this point in the season, like, should we have won this game comfortably? And would I would have liked to win this game comfortably? Yeah, of course. But at this point, win's a win. You take them however you can. And considering how Butler dogged us in Newark, we had to get that win back. And that's what this team went out to Indianapolis to do. And that's exactly what they did. So now they get to go home for 2 big home games that they now can't afford to lose. And I'll talk more. My side mouth, I think, will be hinting at that just a little bit. So I don't want to give it all away just yet.
One other guy we failed to mention was Mike Williams.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Williams has been a topic of conversation over probably the past month because his good games have been far outnumbered by the games where it didn't appear that he showed up. But he hits 2 big threes coming off the bench in the second half on Sunday evening. And that's something where, a lot of people thought, this was the first time this season Seton Hall started the same lineup for their first 24 games. And all of a sudden, Sunday evening, Shaheen Holloway decides, I'm going to put TJ Simpkins in the lineup, replacing Williams because, Williams was in a little bit of a slump. It didn't look like Williams, if Williams doesn't go off early in a game, Williams, and we've talked about this a little bit, he doesn't get into his flow. But Sunday evening, when Seton Hall needed a couple of big threes to catch up to Butler and then ultimately to help forge the lead, Mike Williams was there. And I think that's a testament to, on any given night on this team, you could see any number of people make a contribution that leads to victory. And I think that was, Mike Williams. Obviously, we got what we got from Staten McCray. Sort of a shame he didn't make the All East Big East honor roll because he also had the big game last Wednesday. He had the big game last Wednesday against Providence on top of the big game he had against Butler. He was certainly more consistent than Clark this week. Of course, you have to give Clark his flowers for the 31 points he put up on Wednesday night, as Brian did in last week's episode. But again, this is something where, this team is locked in. This is a team that has not quit, even though they've been given numerous chances to do so. And again, given what people, sometimes when Seton Hall starts to lose a game like this, I go back to the old Dennis Green press conference. If this might, I don't know if it's before your time. You've probably seen it, Tim.
Yeah, they are who we thought they were.
They are who we thought they were. So sometimes I think about that when Seton Hall starts to fall behind in a game like this, and I'm like, okay, they are what they thought they were. They were a team which, people thought was going to be in the bottom of the conference. There were people who didn't think Seton Hall was going to win 10 games the whole season. And certainly if you told me on February the 17th, when we're recording this, that Seton Hall would be 8-7 in the Big East, I'd be shocked. I'd say, who'd we beat to win 8 games? But obviously this team has a lot more mental toughness and a lot more talent than people give it credit for. So, again, they did what they had to do. This has sort of been a theme all season. You look at all the comebacks, the Xavier win a couple of weeks ago, the Providence game last week, the Creighton game back in January, the big win they had up in Providence right before Christmas. It's one of these things where it's funny that Seton Hall has never led wire to wire in any of their 8 Big East victories this season. They've always been behind at some point in all of those games. So I think it's just, this is what they are. They're a team that, doesn't have, although they have good offensive players, they don't play offense well enough for long enough stretches to take leads and build upon leads against decent opponents like the teams we see in the Big East.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, the fact that a couple of things. Number one, they shot under 50% from the line in this game, so it's kind of shocking that they were able to win despite they were 10 of 22. Butler was 13 of 20. But to their credit, not having Finley Bishak for Butler really hurt them in terms of the perimeter because his three-point shooting gave them a whole nother dynamic that without him, they're rather one-dimensional. The Bulldogs were 5 for 21 from 3 in this game. Seton Hall made the same amount of three-pointers in 6 fewer attempts. And Mike Williams was a perfect 2 for 2, which you needed that from him. I thought it was when I saw that Simpkins was starting over Williams in this game, I thought, okay, Shaw's adjusting and trying to do something different to get to at least try to get a better result. And he succeeded. I think he got more out of Williams than he had with him in the starting lineup in the last 2 to 3 weeks or something like that. And then the efficiency, shooting almost 50% from the floor, getting 11 block shots. If is it 11? I don't know why.
Yeah, you mentioned that. You mentioned the 11. Yeah, I mean,
and Hines had what, 5 of them?
5, yes.
And he was 17 minutes. He was outstanding. I mean, maybe his durability will get better as we get deeper into the season, but yeah, because if he plays like this, you're going to need him for more than 17 minutes. So hopefully his stamina will continue to improve because if there's stretches where Payne is struggling, he put up a goose egg in the score sheet in terms of points. And if you need an offensive boost and you need Hines over Payne in that situation, you're going to need him out on the floor longer. So he's got to be in this kind of shape and condition to be out there moving forward.
Right. I had one more point about, it goes back to an old Kevin Willard axiom, which, of course, Shaheen Holloway was an assistant for Willard for many years, starting in Iona, and then was there, I think, for Willard's first, 6 seasons at Seton Hall.
8.
Okay, yeah, including when he did the GA stuff.
Yeah.
Which is, it's not about who starts a game. It's about who finishes it. And we saw this numerous times when Willard was racking up NCAA tournament appearances. You would see a Michael Inze finish a game at power forward if Willard wanted to see something out of Inze. There were times when Kadeem Carrington was not in the starting lineup, but that Carrington would finish games. And, of course, then there's Derek Gordon back in 2016, a guy also came off the bench that season. But when you were in a close game and you needed some defense, you called on Derek Gordon to be that guy. So I think in Holloway's case this season, you've had Simpkins has obviously been doing it most of the season. Hines has come off the bench almost exclusively and had his good moments off the bench. Josh Rivera's had his moments off the bench. Jacob Dar had one good game. I think it was against Georgetown.
Xavier.
If memory serves. And of course, now Williams coming off the bench came to the rescue. So I think it's a matter of you got the 10 guys, and it doesn't matter. You can put 5 guys out there when the ball tips off, but the 5 guys who are going to lead you to victory are the 5 guys you're going to see at the end of the game. So let's transition. We're going to take a couple of minutes to do something that this is what I sort of call the touch the money portion of this episode, which is to talk a little bit about the bracketology situation. Depending on, now Tim has studied the bet bracket matrix. I've studied a couple of bracketologists I follow. A lot of them have put Seton Hall either in what they call the next 4 group, what they call the next 4 out, meaning that if you looked at the field and you put 68 teams in, Seton Hall would sort of be in the group in the mid 70s. Like they would be the 74th, 75th, or 76th team chosen, meaning that you have to overcome at least 8 teams to get into the field. Now, a guy Tim had in the past on his podcast, The Igloo, who's one of the leading bracketologists. I've studied him. Big Dog Underdog,
Yep.
who has finished high in the bracket matrix on a few occasions. If you look, he doesn't even have Seton Hall in his next. He has a group of 8 teams. He doesn't have Seton. The teams he has, first of all, his last 4 in are Georgia, UCLA, Missouri, and Santa Clara. And then his 8 teams on the bubble, so to speak, would be Ohio State, San Diego State, Cal, Virginia Tech, Nevada, West Virginia, VCU, and Oklahoma State. And I think one point that the flaws in Seton Hall's NCAA tournament case are 2 of them. One is the fact that we have 1 quad win victory, and that was the win over North Carolina State all the way out in the Maui Invitational. And secondly, we don't have wins against any of the top 3 teams in the Big East. We lost at home to Connecticut. We lost on the road to St. John's. And we got swept by Villanova. So when you hear about that type of situation, Tim, what is your sense about where Seton Hall is in the bracket, heading into the last 2.5 weeks of the season?
Well, as we saw last year, and I think this is a trend over the last couple of years, the committee has almost become developed a fatal flaw of being overly enamored with the Mountain West. Where like Utah State, like they have the auto bid right now, and they look like a top 8 or 9. Like they look like an 8-9 seed range type of team. San Diego State's one of those like last 4 in, first 4 out. Like I feel like that's a consistent trend across the board. And I still can't believe 2024. I think 5 teams from the Mountain West got in.
I think it was 6.
6, yeah, and Seton Hall somehow did not get in. So this has now become like a bit of a recurring trend amongst the committee. Maybe that changes this time around. And then on top of that, the lack of respect shown for the Big East compared to the other, the Power 4, the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC. The SEC sent freaking 14 of their 16 teams last year, and a lot of them I'm like, really? Like they were like 6-12 in the SEC, and they're getting in the tournament. Like, what are we doing here? But in the case of Seton Hall, I think the fact that they don't have a quad 1 victory outside of NC State back in November, the fact that they haven't had anything to show for it in Big East play, I think just the overall strength of the conference has been a blow to the resume. Not saying that it's not valid, but there's somewhat of a case because it's UConn and St. John's here. Then there's Villanova, here, and then there's tier 3, then Seton Hall here. Like there's a clear separation between 1 and 2 and 3 and then 4. That's kind of, and this is what happened literally like just 2 years ago, where Villanova, not Villanova, UConn,
Marquette, and Connecticut.
Yeah, those 3 were just so much better than all the other teams in the conference that in a way it ended up hurting Seton Hall's at-large hopes. Although, again, they should have gotten in 1,000%. I will never forgive the committee for that, ever. I'll never get over it for that matter, honestly. But, yeah, I just think the big thing is the fact that they had opportunities to do so, mainly the home game against Villanova when they were sitting at 11-1. The road game against St. John's where you're up 15 in the second half and you let that one slip away. And then against UConn, you don't make a 3 until the final minute of regulation. You somehow lose by 5, and you come out of that game looking really good out of the loss. But then that cascades into losing to Butler at home, blowing the lead at St. John's, and then losing a game at DePaul that was, quite frankly, no disrespect to DePaul because they're trending upward. They just beat Creighton for the first time in 11 years, let's not forget. No disrespect to them, but, like, that's a game, like, losing to them is just inexcusable. And we know this team so much better than that. And they have shown how much better they are in recent games, although the Villanova and Creighton games being the exceptions recently. Villanova, they got punked. They deserve to lose. Creighton, they basically gave that one to them, as we talked at length, on a silver platter. Would this conversation be different had they held on to win? 1,000%. There's no debate about that. So,
well, there's 2 things I think that Seton Hall theoretically should be in a better position than they were 2 years ago. One is that our net is higher. Our net around the time of Selection Sunday was I think it was in the 55, 56 range. Right now, our net is 49. So our net is slightly higher than it was 2 years ago. And the other thing is we don't have blowout losses. Like 2 years ago, they got pummeled by Creighton on the road. They got pummeled by Connecticut on the road. They got pummeled by Marquette on the road. Of course, that counterbalances itself by the fact that we beat Connecticut and Marquette at home. Those ended up being our 2. I think those ended up being our 2 quad. I think we had a couple of other road wins. Like this year, for example, nobody went outside of Connecticut, St. John's, and Villanova. Nothing right now in the Big East is a quad 1 road win. There are a few teams that are close, like Providence and Georgetown are and even Butler are in the low 80s right now. I don't want to say I need somebody to make a little bit of a run to get in the quad 1 territory. I still don't think those wins are going to get a lot of respect. I think that, they probably will need to get at least a win against Connecticut on the road or St. John's to really at least give them another quad 1 win, give them another win against a team in the field, and give them something that can leapfrog some of these teams. I mean, if you look at what's near in that 11 line, Georgia not having a great season. UCLA is UCLA. Missouri's been okay, but nothing spectacular. People love the fact that Santa Clara has those 2 wins against St. Mary's. But any other win they lose in their conference, the West Coast Conference, is going to knock them down a notch.
Yep.
What's Ohio State doing here? What's Cal? You mentioned Cal in our little Cal beat. Who did Cal beat? North Carolina?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Everyone loves that win for some reason. I don't. It is what it is. I don't know who Virginia Tech beat. I think Oklahoma State beat West Virginia, and they're still. So again, it's the problem here is that the strength of the schedule for teams like West Virginia, Ohio State, Oklahoma State, and Georgia is better than our strength of schedule because, half of their conferences are making the NCAA tournament. in the Big Ten and the SEC. Whereas, again, you've got, for all intents and purposes, 7 teams in the Big East that have no hope of getting an at-large bid. The only way that Creighton, DePaul, Georgetown, etc. down the line make the tournament is if they run the table at Madison Square Garden. And good luck with that, because you probably have to beat Connecticut and St. John's to do that. And, both of those fan bases are going to be loud and proud when we get to the Garden in a few weeks. So I think that's sort of, that's unfortunately the dilemma that Seton Hall has fallen into. Although the flip side of that is that, given where we're at before the season started, could you have anticipated being in this position? Meaning, if you look at the way you play the Maui Invitational, hoping to get some quality opportunities, and Seton Hall knocked one off against NC State, should have had another one against USC. I think according to this picture here, if I'm looking at correctly, USC is in the field as a 10 seed. So, it's not. And then everyone thought Kansas State was going to be a better win. And, Kansas State is so bad they fired their coach over the weekend. Mm-hmm. So, that's sort of, sometimes you can't help how everyone else on your schedule is going to do. You make the best schedule you can, and you hope that the teams you're playing against end up holding up. NC State is held up. Kansas State didn't. We won't get into Rutgers. That's a different topic for a different day.
Yeah.
So I guess the key here is get these 2 wins this weekend, and then you have a whole week to not only get yourself ready for that game up in Connecticut a week from Saturday. I forgot the game's in Hartford or Gamble. I'll take a quick look.
That sounds right.
Well, it's got to be one of those 2. I don't think they're not playing that game in New Haven, so that game against UConn is at Hartford. Big game next noon on the 28th. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you get past DePaul and Georgetown over the next 4 days to make that game really relevant for Seton Hall.
Yeah, and I think it was kind of like, so 2 years ago when during championship week, all that chaos was happening in Seton Hall in order to get in that large bid. They needed the bid stealers to lose. And unfortunately, that just didn't happen. So I feel like internally, they're probably rooting for teams to, for example, this past week, Cal played at Syracuse. Internally, with Cal being in that discussion, they're like, God, please, Syracuse, just win this game. And they almost blew it. But Syracuse did beat Cal, which is a bit of a big blow considering, Syracuse has played better recently up until Monday night when Duke absolutely beat the shit out of them at Cameron Indoor. But you kind of look around and you see teams like Santa Clara, San Diego State, New Mexico. You want them to lose at some point. Maybe losing a couple games would be helpful in order for Seton Hall to get on the right side of the bubble once again. They have in front of them 5 games, and at least 3 of them they have to win. The 2 games at the Rock coming up this week. And then realistically, I think they have to win at Xavier, considering how the first meeting
I think
went.
Definitely you have to win it. I mean, it's a game that you don't get to add to the win total. And I think the win total is probably Seton Hall's advantage over most of these teams. And we have 18 right now, and some of the teams we've mentioned only have 16. So if wins mean something, then Seton Hall's got an edge on that. Before we head off to the last segment, you wanted a brief opportunity to rant about the debacle up in Providence on set. It's been gone over in a few shows on this network, but Tim, being the high school referee that he is, and the president of the kick change breeding out from the Big East, wants to give you a few minutes about his thoughts about what went down Saturday afternoon.
All right, well, let's get right into it. It was funny how on Saturday I was flipping through channels I think I was watching like one of the Olympic women's hockey games at that time, and I switched channels. I find TNT, and we're in the second half, and within the first 5 minutes of me flipping the channel, that's when the brawl breaks out. And I know the second that foul's committed, I know that's going to be at least an F1, because I initially thought he made a play on the ball trying to block it like that. I didn't even see that any of the officials, Breeding, Piazza, or Farrell, I didn't even see that they came up with this. But yeah, that everything about that was just so ugly and disgusting to me. The foul itself, Hopkins, listen, in psychology, there's this thing, fight, flight, or freeze. And out of that's a natural response when you feel threatened by something. And that his mechanism in that, his natural instinct was to choose fight. And so that's why he responded the way they did, take an exception to the hard foul by Duncan Powell. For Powell to not have any remorse for that, or that ugly ass haircut in the back of his head, that I think that I'm going to get a lot of shit for this. All right. But I don't care. The way that Powell behaved during that entire situation, from after he committed the foul, trying to stand tall over him, like, yeah. And for him to continue to escalate and to throw a forearm. I know it was a punch, but he ended up hitting someone with a really weak forearm during that scuffle. And then the fact that Breeding said over the mic before they even got to the monitor, saying 31 White has been ejected for a flagrant 2 foul. The play is under review for further disciplinary action. So in that moment, Powell was ejected. Why the fuck was he allowed to stay on the court for another 19 minutes or however long it was that they were investigating everything? He should have been in the locker room. And for him to just look around like he did nothing wrong, like, yeah, look at me, I'm the shit. Like, just like, you're not even the fart, Duncan, shut up. Like, okay. And for him to just, revel in this, and, Providence fans to chant his name like that, like, to me, I think that's just awful, for one. And number two, like, chanting fuck Bryce Hopkins, like, okay, like, I get it. You hate the kid because he left for literal greener pastures in the Big East with St. John's, and it's a conference rival. I get it. But, like, at some point, like, you gotta like relax a little bit and realize that, like, okay, our guy he probably shouldn't have done what he did. Like, his conduct was just so egregious. And for Val Ackerman and the Big East office to only hit him with a 3-game suspension, to me, I felt like it was a slap on the wrist. And here's why. And I tweeted about this. For those of you that remember, 11 years ago, Sterling Gibbs, in a game at Villanova, was trying to go knock a loose ball away from Ryan Arcidiacono, but he deliberately struck him in the face when he was trying to go for the loose ball. And he only got a 2-game suspension for that. The fact that Duncan Powell only got 1 more game than Sterling got for what he did, that is an egregious miscarriage of justice, in my opinion. He should have gotten at least 5. He should have been done for the rest of the regular season and only been allowed to come back in time for the Big East tournament that second week in March. And then I think other disciplinary things, I think they really, across the board, I think the officials on the court and then the front office, I think they fucked a lot of it up. I don't think Hopkins got a technical for what he did. Unless I missed something in the report afterward, or when the referees were reporting everything over the mic after.
Hopkins really, according to people who were at the game that commented on the situation, how Hopkins ran the center court as the fight was breaking out, because I think he knew he was a target of everyone in a Providence uniform. Yeah. Of course, then the 3 St. John's guys who are on the bench jump in. The 3 guys who got kicked out of the game, Saddiqui Adu,
Yeah.
I butchered his name. Siddiqui Ayu, Ode, Kevin Ode, and another name I butchered. I apologize. I don't think St. John's fans are going to watch this. And then Dylan Mitchell got kicked out of the game because they jumped off the bench, which is sort of like a cardinal rule. It's a zero tolerance policy.
Leaving the bench is an automatic ejection. No matter how you size it up.
I don't want to. That's the problem. Patino then says they were defending a teammate. Well, the rules don't allow for that. That's just a situation where, and again, they didn't really do anything. I trying to think. I don't remember anybody on St. John's.
Ray got ejected too, I think.
Maybe
for leaving the bench.
Of course. One comment I would have about the situation myself would be, it got to a point that the weird part is, I think Providence was winning by 1.
Yeah.
When Powell committed the foul, and at that point, I think Powell and a couple of the other guys, Sellers, I don't know what I think of what Jameer Jones was thinking. But I think a couple of those people were really trying to play to that audience because they know their team's not going anywhere this season. Kim English is likely going to get fired. They're not making the NCAA tournament. They're going to lose 20 games again. So really what they wanted was to have their gladiator in the ring moment where they took down their opponent and then Powell gets to act like he's Randy Macho Man Savage because he clotheslined somebody outside. He clotheslined Ted DiBiase. I'm dating myself almost 40 years here, but I'm talking about like the Macho Man clotheslines Ted DiBiase and he knocks the $1 Million Man out and he gets to go around and, flex his muscles and do all this other stuff.
Better analogy, Stone Cold stunning the boss.
Yeah, that could be another one. I mean, the point is that he's not concerned about Powell at some point decided winning the game was less important than making a scene. And then the other two things happened as St. John's was taking the lead. And that ultimately led to St. John's. When St. John's got the lead after they restarted play, Providence was never really in it. So at that point, Jones and Sellers just took the attitude that, let's get our standing ovation by pulling the cheap shots that we're doing. So it was sort of, again, but to sort of piggyback off something else here that I would say is, why is James Breeding put into these high pressure situations? I get it. He's been the 4 Final Fours. I don't know how many other referees in the Big East rotation have been the 4 Final Fours. The people who work for Val Ackerman on the competition committee perceive him to be one of the best referees. But of course, then you have to have never watched a Big East game.
Yep.
And never followed people who watch Big East games, who tell you that every time Breeding's on the court, something bad happens. Not every time, but more often than not, bad things happen when James Breeding goes up. We've talked a number of times in a number of forums about the infamous 2019 Big East tournament semifinal between Seton Hall and Marquette, when there were at least 2 or 3 scrums towards the middle of the second half, and the quirky Miles Powell didn't end up being kicked out of the game because one of the fouls was a technical and the other one was a flagrant, and you need to get two of column A or 2 of column B, and you can't get 1 of column A and 1 of column B to disqualify. That's a different question. The point was that, Breeding didn't stop the bleeding when he should have. And walking into a game like this, if you don't understand the context of this game, the fact that Bryce Hopkins is a marked man, not only by the spectators, but also probably the Providence players. This was something he probably didn't think. He didn't think that the Providence players were going to get their moment of the season by, taking on Bryce Hopkins. So
yeah, and that actually plays into something, a point I want to make, and to make an analogy to for you Mets fans out there. there was the Sunday night game 10 years ago, the year before in the playoffs. That was when Chase Utley broke Ruben Tejada's leg on that dirty slide in the playoffs. And Sunday Night Baseball comes rolling around. Utley comes to bat, and Noah Syndergaard throws behind him. And the home plate umpire yanks him just for that one alone. And Terry Collins goes ballistic on the umpires, saying they're like, you got to give us a shot. You got to give us a shot. And I forgot what the name of the umpire is, but I love the guy because he let Terry speak his piece, and then he eventually spoke his, which was like, Terry, our ass is in the jackpot because of everything that led to it. Like, you couldn't just allow the blatant throw behind Utley, even though Utley, that was a bullshit slide. He's a dirty player. The fact that he's even close to the Hall of Fame should be a human rights violation. If he gets into Cooperstown, there is going to be a massive uproar in Cooperstown with all these Mets fans who are going to come up and boo the shit out of him. And he should be a marked man for everything he did. Like what he did was wrong, and he got his receipt. And unfortunately, the context of it was like they can't allow it because they got to protect him. Because if Syndergaard doesn't get him, someone else on the Mets staff is going to get him. So, how that ties into this, okay, is because that the context. Bryce Hopkins is back in Providence. It's a highly contested situation. The fans are going to give him shit for 40 minutes of game time and 2+ hours of real time. And speaking of that, I thought for Bryce, I know that what I'm saying he should have got technical for was the retaliatory push after the foul was committed, and he did that. That should have just been one technical for that action. That was that. But the context, but he actually did a smart thing by getting out of there after the fact. He's probably going to get hit with some tall boys or something, or just berating or God knows what. Like either
he was
a verbal attack or a physical attack. He was going to get something.
He was lucky not to leave the amp hurt on Saturday afternoon because I think it is what it is. I mean, people say Providence fans are the some of the most brutal in the Big East, and they are amongst the most passionate for sure. I don't think they want the reputation of taking another player out, even one who they despise, who frankly might deserve it. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, one thing I would say is that, if you're going to take the money, you got to deal. It happens in baseball all the time. It's going to happen with the Mets when Pete Alonso shows up in Baltimore. I don't think Pete Alonso is going to get a very friendly welcome when the Orioles show up at Citi Field. I don't think they play at Citi Field this year, but in 2027 or whenever whenever Alonso's slated to be in the lineup against the Mets, he's going to get booed because he took the money. So same principle, same thing. I guess it'll be interesting to see what happens if Providence somehow gets a game with St. John's again at the Garden for the Big East tournament in a few weeks, because there'll be a small Providence contingent, but I'm sure they'll have their voices heard. And who knows what else would transpire on. I think either it would be the noon game on Thursday or the 7:00 game on Thursday. Who knows what will transpire if St. John's and Providence meet up again.
Yeah. So, all right. Last thing I got on that in terms of the, I've always preached that failing to prepare is preparing to fail, and how that ties in terms of refereeing a game. When you're prepared and you do your homework, you've either seen teams play or you've ref teams before. You have to do your homework and know, do these teams have history? How do they play? What kind of environment am I walking into? What kind of crew am I working with? How do they call the game? How do I call the game? How's it going to fit in? For James Breeding and that crew to be so underprepared. And I think this is more an indictment on Breeding because he tends to get himself into these situations more often than anybody else that is considered a regular Big East official. And the other two guys he was with, Tony Chiazza and Nathan Farrell, are pretty regular Big East guys too. And they're decent, but Breeding brought them down so so badly that what you saw in that fight is a result of a lack of preparation and a poor execution of a refereeing game plan. And it sucked. I hated seeing Nathan Farrell got trucked in the early going in that fight. And Breeding, I'm pretty sure he went down at some point. I think all three of them might have taken a spill because of all of the debauchery and chaos that was happening in that whole brouhaha. But I will say Breeding did the right thing. The flagrant 2 on Jones, that was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. It was so obvious, the two-handed push, not playing the ball. I know he didn't have a lot on it, but like it was so obvious that like considering how the game was going, St. John's was running away, and he just commits this foul like dog, just get me the fuck out of this game. Like I'm mentally checked out. And even Kim English is like, what are we doing here? Like, and that should be an indictment on how Providence was playing at the time. And Kim English's thing was mindset, and in that moment, and unfortunately, as a whole, mindset for Providence is not really good right now, and it's probably a good thing they got a bye week and a whole week to prepare for the final stretch of the season to cool down, and then you go to DePaul, and then you finish out the rest of the regular season there. Yeah, that's my soapbox rant about Breeding and that whole incident across all layers. And I think, the disciplinary action, I think there should have been much swifter punishments in the game itself. And then in the aftermath, Powell should have gotten at least 5. And then I don't know if anything else came from like guys like Sellers' involvement, Mitchell's involvement, and with Jameer Jones's foul as well later in the game. I didn't read anything further beyond the 3 games that Powell got.
So speaking of failing to prepare, preparing to fail, it's time for the Sign Mafia. So
well, all right. So in January, after Butler beat Seton Hall, their at-large hopes were still relatively alive. And I forgot who it was, a Butler fan on Twitter tweeted #the window, because they had a very favorable slate over the next 2 weeks or so after that game. And like that was the window of opportunity for them. And unfortunately, that window closed quickly because they lost a game that they shouldn't have lost. So to borrow that Butler fan, after winning at Butler on Sunday, our #the window is now open. That window of opportunity that begins at the Rock with DePaul and Georgetown this week, and then you get the week off. I would be delusional, or as the kids say, I'd be giving Delulu if I thought that we could win at UConn and that we will win at UConn. That's just not happening. UConn's a wagon, rightfully so. But there is opportunity, as we talked about before, the 2 games that we're talking about this week, at Xavier in their last road game of the season, and then the big one, St. John's at the Rock. I think in order to get in the tournament, you can afford to lose to UConn. But if you beat St. John's in your last quad 1 opportunity before the Big East tournament, the committee, more often than not, they tend to have short memories, and they'll remember more of what you did more recently than what you do later in the season. 2 years ago, those wins against UConn and Marquette came in the middle of December and early January, respectively. Okay. Here, if they can beat St. John's at home at the very end of the regular season, that's a quad 1 win right there against one of the highest rising teams in tournament stock, with how starting 7-4 out of conference with no real good wins in that stretch. And then in addition, you have the fact that after that, St. John's has only lost 1 game since then, and that was against Providence in early January. So they're the hottest team in the conference, one of the hottest teams in the country, And if you could take them down at the Rock to end the regular season, to close that window, winning 4 of 5, locking up a 4 seed probably in the Big East tournament, I think it would be shocking if the committee looked at this team and said, nah, they're not tournament worthy. Like, you beat NC State and St. John's, but that's it. Like, you have to consider, okay, if this team goes 12-8 in the Big East with 22 wins in the regular season, to exclude them from this tournament, unless they lose in the quarterfinal round, they shouldn't be excluded. But this is the fourth quarter of the Big East season. The window is open. Seize this opportunity. This is your chance. It's all in your hands now, Seton Hall. Control what you control, win the games you have to win. And if you can steal one against St. John's to be the exclamation point before the road to the Garden officially begins in that second week of March, you should be on the right side of the bubble. So hopefully they'll be able to accomplish this with a lot less drama. But that remains to be seen. But one game at a time, don't look ahead. You win. We're on to DePaul. We're on to Georgetown after that. So just as Al Davis said too, just win, baby.
I'm going to throw a hot take out there. I think that Connecticut game next Saturday is winnable. Georgetown almost knocked them off on Saturday night I think that was up in Gampel. Villanova took Connecticut to overtime at home. I think that was the first week of February. I don't remember exactly what the date.
I think it was like late January.
Yeah, it might have been the last weekend. And earlier in the season, Villanova almost beat them at home. Georgetown almost beat them at home. They've had a couple of other close games at home. Connecticut has won a lot of close games. They haven't had a lot of blowouts in their, 12-1 or 13-1 in the Big East?
I think they're 14-1.
Out. So I think if a team like Seton Hall can keep it competitive and maybe correct a couple of the mistakes that they made. But we'll have time to talk about that once this stretch of games is over. At that stretch. So we're on to this will go out Thursday, so we'll see what happens on Wednesday. Brian will have some commentary about Wednesday's game against DePaul. Then we play Georgetown on Saturday, which is not going to be an easy one because Georgetown is playing a lot better than when we played them down in Washington in the second week of January. And then we get the week off for the big three at the end of the season.
Ahoy there! Ahoy, me hearties!